In a time of deep corruption and spiritual blindness, when leaders twisted justice and prophets spoke only for profit, a voice arose from the countryside, not from palaces or courts, but from the fields and quiet places. This was Micah, a man chosen by God to confront a nation that had forgotten righteousness. Hear this, all people, listen, O earth, and all who dwell in it, for the Lord God is about to testify against you. Behold, the Lord is coming from his holy temple. He steps down from the heavens, and the mountains melt beneath him. The valleys split apart like wax before fire, like waters rushing down a steep slope. This is because of rebellion, because of sin. The people have turned away, building their lives on injustice and calling it success. Samaria will fall, its idols shattered, its wealth burned with fire, and Jerusalem, though it bears the name of God, is no different. Her leaders take bribes, her priests teach for money, her prophets tell lies for profit. They say, "Is not the Lord among us? No harm will come to us." But they do not realize that judgment is already at the door. Because of this, grief overwhelms the prophet. He weeps and wails, walking barefoot and stripped of dignity, mourning like a creature in the wilderness, for the wound of his people is incurable. It has spread from Samaria even to the gates of Jerusalem. Disaster has come not by chance, but by the hand of the Lord. Cities tremble, fear spreads, and those who once felt secure now run in terror. The mighty are brought low, the proud are humbled, yet still they do not understand why. Woe to those who lie awake at night planning evil, who at the break of day carry out their schemes, because it is in their power. They covet fields and seize them. They take houses and drive families from their homes, oppressing a man and his inheritance, crushing the weak to strengthen themselves. Therefore the Lord declares that he is planning disaster against them from which they cannot escape. They will no longer walk proudly, for it will be a time of calamity. In that day others will mock them and sing bitter songs over their downfall. Their land will be divided, their wealth given to others, and they will have no one left to restore what has been lost. Still, the people resist the truth. They say, "Do not prophesy, do not speak of judgment," for they do not want truth, they want comfort. They prefer voices that promise peace when there is no peace, messages that affirm their desires rather than challenge their sin. If someone comes promising wine and prosperity, they gladly listen, but the true word of God they reject. Yet the Lord declares that his words do good to those who walk uprightly. But the people have risen as enemies against themselves, stripping the robe from the peaceful, driving women from their homes, robbing children of their future. Therefore they are told to rise and go, for this is not their resting place. Because of their sin it is destroyed beyond repair, yet even in judgment a promise remains. The Lord declares that he will gather the remnant of Israel, bringing them together like sheep in a pen, like a flock in its pasture. The one who breaks open the way will go before them, their king will pass through the gates, and the Lord himself will lead them. The message then turns sharply toward the leaders. Hear this, you rulers of Jacob. Should you not embrace justice? Yet they hate good and love evil, tearing the skin from the people and breaking their bones, treating them like meat for the pot. One day they will cry out to the Lord, but he will not answer. He will hide his face from them because of the evil they have done. The prophets who lead people astray declare peace when they are fed, but wage war when denied, and so night will come upon them. No visions, no revelations, no answers. The sun will set on their lies, and darkness will cover their deception. But Micah stands apart and declares with boldness that he is filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, with justice and strength, to declare to Jacob his transgression and to Israel his sin. He confronts the rulers who despise justice and distort what is right, who build Zion with bloodshed and Jerusalem with wickedness, yet still claim that the Lord is with them. Because of this, Zion will be plowed like a field. Jerusalem will become a heap of ruins, and the Temple Hill will be overgrown like a forest. Yet the story does not end in destruction. A vision of hope breaks through the darkness. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established above all others, and nations will flow to it. People from every land will say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, that he may teach us his ways. He will judge between nations and settle disputes among many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not rise against nation, and they will not learn war any more. Every person will sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one will make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." And from a small and seemingly insignificant place, Bethlehem, will come a ruler whose origins are from ancient times. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, and his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. He will be their peace. The Lord then promises purification. He will remove idols, destroy false worship, cut off reliance on human strength, and eliminate sorcery and deception. No longer will people trust in chariots or power, but in God alone. Those who refuse this purification will face judgment, but those who turn will be restored. The Lord brings a case against his people, asking what he has done to burden them. He reminds them of his faithfulness, of how he delivered and guided them, yet they respond with empty religion, asking what offerings will satisfy him. Burnt offerings, thousands of rams, rivers of oil, even their firstborn. But the answer is simple and clear. He has shown what is good, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. Despite this, corruption continues. The rich are violent, the merchants dishonest, and the leaders corrupt. Therefore punishment is inevitable. They will eat, but not be satisfied, store, but save nothing, plant, but not harvest. Everything they build will fail, because it is rooted in wickedness. Faithful people seem to have vanished, and there is no one upright left. Trust is broken everywhere. Friends cannot be trusted, families are divided, and even within households there is betrayal. Yet in the midst of this darkness, Micah declares his hope. He watches for the Lord, waits for God his Savior, confident that God will hear him. Though he has fallen, he will rise. Though he sits in darkness, the Lord will be my light. God will bring him into the light, and he will see his righteousness. His enemies will witness it and be covered with shame. The message closes not with judgment, but with mercy. Who is like God, who pardons sin and forgives transgression? He does not stay angry forever, but delights in showing mercy. He will again have compassion, treading sins underfoot and casting them into the depths of the sea. He will remain faithful to his promises, just as he has always been. And so the voice of Micah echoes through time, a warning to the proud, a call to the unjust, and a comfort to the faithful. God sees all, judges righteously, and yet delights in mercy. Therefore act justly, love mercy, walk humbly, and trust in the one who never fails. And as the echo of mercy settles upon the horizon of judgment, the voice of the prophet does not fade, but deepens, drawing the listener into a more intimate reflection of the human condition before a holy God. For the story of Israel is not distant, nor confined to ancient cities of stone and dust, but alive in every generation that forgets justice and replaces truth with convenience. The same patterns unfold, the same hearts wander, the same choices return like a cycle unbroken. And yet, so does the patience of God, who speaks again and again, not because he must, but because he desires restoration over destruction. The Lord calls not only to a nation, but to every soul that is drifted, every heart that is hardened, every life that is settled for less than righteousness. Consider the weight of his question, spoken not in anger alone, but in wounded love. What have I done to you? It is not the cry of a distant ruler, but of a faithful Father. From deliverance to provision, from guidance to protection, his record stands unbroken. Yet his people respond with distance, with ritual instead of relationship, with offerings instead of obedience. They seek to negotiate with holiness, to replace transformation with transaction, to silence conviction with sacrifice. But the Lord does not desire performance. He desires alignment, not abundance of offerings, but sincerity of heart, not outward display, but inward truth. And so the call remains simple yet profound, cutting through generations with unwavering clarity. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly, not as occasional acts, but as a way of life, a rhythm of being, a posture of the soul. Justice, not only in courts or leadership, but in daily interactions, in unseen decisions, in quiet moments where integrity is tested. Mercy, not only when convenient, but when it costs, when it stretches patience, when forgiveness feels undeserved. And humility, not as weakness, but as strength under control, a recognition that all authority, all provision, all life itself flows from God. Yet the world resists this call. It builds systems that reward greed, celebrates power without accountability, and elevates voices that promise ease over truth. Just as in the days of Micah, there are those who speak what people want to hear, crafting messages that soothe rather than challenge, that affirm rather than transform. But truth does not bend to preference. It stands steady and unchanging, whether embraced or rejected, and those who align with it find life, while those who resist it build on foundations that cannot stand. Still, even in resistance, grace remains available. The Lord does not close the door at the first failure, nor withdraw at the first sign of rebellion. He calls again and again and again and again, each time offering the same invitation: return. Return from injustice, return from pride, return from empty living, not to condemnation, but to restoration. For his desire is not to destroy, but to rebuild, not to cast away, but to redeem. And even when discipline comes, it is not without purpose. It is a refining fire, burning away what destroys, so that what is true may remain. And in this refining, a deeper hope begins to emerge, one not limited to Israel, but extended to all nations, all people, all who would listen. The vision of peace, once spoken as a future promise, begins to take shape in the hearts of those who believe. A world where conflict gives way to cooperation, where weapons are transformed into tools of growth, where fear is replaced with security. It is not merely a political vision nor a human achievement, but a divine restoration, a reordering of creation under the authority of God. At the center of this hope stands the promised ruler, the one from Bethlehem, whose origins are from ancient times. Not a king like others, driven by conquest or sustained by power, but a shepherd, guiding with care, leading with wisdom, protecting with strength. His rule is not oppressive, but life-giving. His authority does not crush, but restores. And under his leadership, peace is not temporary, but lasting, not fragile, but secure. He becomes the answer to every longing, the fulfillment of every promise, the embodiment of God's presence among his people. And so the narrative stretches forward, beyond the immediate, beyond the visible, into a future shaped by faithfulness. For even when the present is marked by struggle, the promise remains intact. God does not forget what he has spoken. Time does not weaken his word. Circumstances do not alter his intention. What he has declared, he will accomplish. What he has begun, he will complete. This is why hope persists, even in darkness. Not because circumstances improve immediately, but because God remains constant. The prophet declares it with confidence, not based on what he sees, but on who God is. Though I have fallen, I will rise. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. It is a defiant hope, one that refuses to surrender to despair, one that stands firm even when surrounded by uncertainty. It is the kind of hope that transforms suffering into endurance and endurance into faith. And as the final words of the message unfold, they do not return to judgment, but rest in mercy. Who is like God? The question lingers, not as a challenge, but as a declaration. There is none like him, none who forgives so completely, none who restores so faithfully, none who delights in mercy as he does. He does not cling to anger, nor hold grudges across generations. Instead, he releases, he restores, he renews. He takes what was broken and makes it whole. He takes what was lost and brings it back. He takes sin itself and casts it into the depths, beyond reach, beyond remembrance. And this is where the story finds its resting place, not in fear, but in assurance, not in uncertainty, but in trust. The same God who judged is the God who forgives. The same God who warned is the God who restores. The same God who called out sin is the God who covers it with mercy. And so the invitation remains, as relevant now as it was then, to listen, to respond, to return, and to walk in the way that leads to life. For the voice of Micah is not silent. It continues to speak, through time, through circumstance, through every heart willing to hear. A voice calling for justice in a world of compromise, for mercy in a culture of division, for humility in an age of pride. A voice reminding us that God sees, God cares, and God acts. And above all, a voice pointing to the truth that mercy is not the absence of justice, but its fulfillment, and that in God both meet perfectly. So walk the path set before you, not with fear, but with purpose. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly, and trust in the one whose faithfulness never fails, whose promises never fade, and whose mercy endures forever. And as the final echoes of mercy settle into the depths of the soul, the message does not end, but continues to unfold within the quiet spaces of reflection where truth lingers long after words have been spoken. For the voice of the prophet was never meant to be confined to a moment in history, but to become a living call that moves across generations, reaching into the present, pressing gently yet firmly upon every heart that dares to listen. It is here, in this stillness, that the weight of the message becomes personal, no longer about a distant people, but about the condition of every life that stands before God. For what is Israel, if not a mirror, a reflection of humanity's tendency to wander, to forget, to drift toward comfort rather than conviction? The same patterns that marked their story continue to appear in subtle ways, in the quiet compromises, in the overlooked injustices, in the moments when truth is known but not followed. And yet, just as then, the call of God remains steady, not shifting with culture, not softening with time, but holding firm in its invitation. Return to what is right, return to what is good, return to me. And in this returning there is no demand for perfection, but for surrender. Not a call to achieve righteousness through effort alone, but to align with the heart of God, to step into a life shaped by His ways rather than our own desires. For the burden of self-sufficiency was never meant to be carried, and the illusion of control was never meant to define us. Instead, there is a deeper way, a quieter path, one that moves not in pride, but in humility, not in striving, but in trust. This is the path Micah pointed toward, not as an abstract idea, but as a lived reality. To act justly is to recognize the value of others, to treat each person not as a means to an end, but as someone created with purpose and dignity. It is to reject exploitation in all its forms, whether visible or hidden, whether systemic or personal. It is to stand for what is right, even when it is costly, even when it is unpopular, even when it demands sacrifice. For justice is not merely an action, but a reflection of God's own character, and to walk in it is to walk in alignment with Him. To love mercy is to go beyond obligation, to extend compassion where judgment would be easier, to choose forgiveness where resentment would feel justified. It is to see others not only in their failures, but in their potential, not only in their brokenness, but in their capacity for restoration. Mercy does not ignore truth, but it responds to it with grace, creating space for healing, for growth, for transformation. And in loving mercy, the heart begins to reflect the very nature of God, who delights not in punishment, but in redemption. And to walk humbly is to recognize the rightful place of God in every aspect of life. It is to release the need for control, to let go of the illusion of self-importance, to live with an awareness that every breath, every opportunity, every moment is a gift. Humility is not weakness, but clarity, a clear vision of who we are and who God is. It frees the soul from comparison, from pride, from the endless striving for recognition, and instead anchors it in something far more stable, far more enduring. Yet even as this path is laid out, the reality of human weakness remains. There will be moments of failure, times when justice is neglected, when mercy is withheld, when pride takes root once again. But the message of Micah does not leave us in that place. It does not end with expectation alone, but with assurance. For the same God who calls us to walk rightly is the God who restores us when we fall, who lifts us when we stumble, who remains faithful even when we are not. And so the hope of the message is not found in human consistency, but in divine faithfulness. It is not dependent on perfect obedience, but on a perfect God. This is why the prophet could declare with confidence that though he had fallen, he would rise, though he sat in darkness, the Lord would be his light. It is a hope that does not deny reality, but transcends it, rooted not in circumstances, but in the unchanging nature of God. And this nature is revealed most clearly in His mercy, a mercy that does not simply overlook sin, but overcomes it, that does not excuse wrongdoing, but transforms the one who turns back. He treads sin underfoot, not to diminish its seriousness, but to demonstrate His power over it. He casts it into the depths of the sea, not as an act of forgetfulness, but as a declaration that it no longer defines those who are forgiven. This is the kind of mercy that restores identity, that rebuilds what was broken, that renews what was lost. And so the story, though it began with warning, finds its true resolution in restoration. The tension between justice and mercy is not left unresolved, but brought together in the character of God, where both are held in perfect balance. Justice ensures that wrong is addressed, that truth is upheld, that righteousness is not compromised. Mercy ensures that restoration is possible, that grace is extended, that no failure is beyond redemption. And in this balance we find not contradiction, but completeness. And this is the enduring message, the thread that runs through every word, every warning, every promise. It is a message that calls for awareness, for reflection, for response. Not a passive listening, but an active engagement, a willingness to examine the heart, to align the life, to walk differently because of what has been heard. For truth that is heard but not lived becomes weight, but truth that is embraced becomes life. And so the invitation remains open, not limited by time, not restricted by place, not reserved for a select few, but extended to all who are willing. To step away from what corrupts, to turn toward what restores, to choose the path that leads not to destruction, but to life. It is not always the easiest path, nor the most celebrated, but it is the one that endures, the one that holds firm when all else fades. And as the final moments draw near, there is no need for urgency driven by fear, but rather a quiet, steady resolve, a recognition that the choice set before us is both simple and profound, both immediate and eternal. To walk in justice, to love mercy, to live humbly with God, not as a burden, but as a calling, not as a restriction, but as a freedom. For in this way of living, there is alignment with the very design of life itself, a return to what was always intended, a restoration of what was always meant to be. And in that restoration there is peace, not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of God, a peace that steadies the heart, that anchors the soul, that carries through every season, every challenge, every uncertainty. And so the voice grows quiet, not because it has nothing more to say, but because it has said what must be heard. The rest now lies in the response, in the quiet decisions, in the unseen choices that shape the direction of a life. For the message of Micah is not meant to remain as words alone, but to become a living reality, a daily walk, a continual turning toward what is true. And in that walk there is assurance that the God who called is the God who walks alongside, that the one who spoke is the one who sustains, and that the mercy that began the journey is the same mercy that will carry it to completion. And so the silence that follows is not empty, but full, carrying within it the weight of everything that has been spoken. Like a seed planted deep beneath the surface, unseen for a time, yet alive with the potential to grow. For the message of Micah is not designed to end with sound, but to continue in transformation, moving from hearing into being, from reflection into action. It settles into the conscience, gently pressing, quietly reminding, faithfully calling, long after the voice itself has faded. For there is a moment in every life when truth becomes unavoidable, when the distractions quiet just enough for clarity to emerge, when the question is no longer what has been said, but what will be done in response. It is in these moments that the true impact of the message is revealed, not in emotion alone, but in direction, in the subtle but powerful shift of the heart toward what is right. And though such moments may seem small, they carry the weight of eternity, for they shape the path ahead one decision at a time. The world continues as it always has, filled with noise, with urgency, with competing voices all demanding attention, each offering its own version of truth, its own path to fulfillment, its own definition of success. Yet beneath all of this, the voice of God remains steady, unchanging, not raised in competition, but present in clarity. It does not force itself upon the listener, but invites patiently, consistently, waiting for the moment when the heart is ready to hear. And when that moment comes, it does not overwhelm, but illuminates, bringing light to what was hidden, understanding to what was confused, purpose to what once felt uncertain. And in that light, the illusions begin to fade. The pursuit of power without righteousness reveals its emptiness. The accumulation of wealth without integrity shows its instability. The appearance of success without truth exposes its fragility. For everything built apart from God carries within it the seeds of its own collapse, no matter how strong it may appear, no matter how secure it may seem. And yet, this realization is not meant to lead to despair, but to awakening, to the recognition that there is another way, a better way, a lasting way. It is the way of alignment with God, where life is no longer driven by impulse, but guided by truth, where choices are no longer shaped by convenience, but by conviction. It is a way that does not promise ease, but offers depth, not one that avoids challenge, but provides strength within it. And those who walk this path discover something that cannot be manufactured or imitated, a sense of peace that remains even when circumstances shift, a stability that holds firm even when the world around them changes. And those who walk this path discover something that cannot be manufactured, a sense of peace that remains even when circumstances shift. This is the quiet reward of obedience, not always visible to others, not always recognized by the world, but deeply real, deeply sustaining. It is found in the integrity of a life lived honestly, in the freedom of a heart unburdened by hidden guilt, in the strength that comes from knowing that one's steps are aligned with something greater than self. And though such a life may not always be easy, it is always meaningful, always grounded, always moving towards something that endures. And still the journey is not without struggle. There will be moments of doubt, times when the path seems unclear, when the weight of past failures resurfaces, when the distance between where one is and where one longs to be feels overwhelming. But even here, the message of Micah speaks again, not with condemnation, but with assurance. For the God who calls for justice and humility is also the God who restores and renews, who does not abandon in weakness, but strengthens through it. He meets the weary with compassion, the broken with healing, the uncertain with guidance. He does not demand that the journey be walked alone, but offers his presence as a constant companion, a steady anchor. And in this presence there is a renewed courage, a willingness to continue, to take the next step, even when the entire path is not yet visible. For faith is not the absence of questions, but the decision to trust beyond them. It is the quiet confidence that even when understanding is incomplete, God remains faithful, that even when the outcome is unknown, His purpose is secure. And this faith, though it may begin as a small and fragile thing, grows stronger with each step, with each act of trust, with each moment of choosing what is right over what is easy. And as it grows, it begins to shape not only the individual, but the world around them. For a life lived in justice, mercy, and humility does not exist in isolation. It influences, it inspires, it creates ripples that extend far beyond what can be seen. Acts of kindness multiply, integrity sets an example, truth challenges falsehood, and slowly, steadily, change begins to take root. Not always in dramatic ways, not always immediately visible, but real nonetheless. This is how transformation spreads, not through force, but through faithfulness, not through control, but through consistency. And though it may seem small in the moment, it carries a power far greater than it appears, for it is aligned with the very design of life itself, and what is aligned with Him cannot ultimately fail. And so the message continues, not as a distant echo, but as a present reality, unfolding in the lives of those who choose to walk in it. It becomes less about remembering the words, and more about embodying them, less about hearing the call, and more about answering it. And in this answering there is a sense of purpose that cannot be found elsewhere, a clarity that cuts through confusion, a direction that remains steady even when circumstances shift. For at its core, the message of Micah is not complicated, though it is deeply profound. It does not require extraordinary ability, but willing hearts. It does not demand perfection, but persistence. It does not call for grand gestures alone, but for daily faithfulness, for consistent choices, for a life that reflects the character of God in both seen and unseen ways. And in this process there is grace, abundant and unending, covering each misstep, strengthening each effort, sustaining each moment. And as the journey continues, there comes a deeper understanding that this path is not merely about avoiding wrongdoing, but about becoming something new, about being shaped, refined, transformed into a reflection of God's own heart. It is a process, gradual and ongoing, marked by growth, by learning, by continual returning. It is grace that allows the journey to continue, that turns setbacks into stepping stones. And it is this grace that ultimately defines the message, not as one of fear, but of hope, not as one of condemnation, but of invitation. For the story that began with warning now rests fully in promise, a promise that extends beyond time, beyond circumstance, beyond limitation, a promise that God is faithful, that His mercy endures, that His purpose will stand. And those who walk with Him, who trust in Him, who align their lives with His ways, will find themselves carried by that faithfulness, sustained by that mercy, guided by that purpose. And so the narrative does not truly end, but continues, written not on pages, but in lives, not confined to the past, but active in the present. It is a story still unfolding, still being lived, still being shaped by those who choose to respond. And in that unfolding, the voice of Micah remains steady and clear, calling each generation to the same truth, the same path, the same hope, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. And as this call resonates deeper, it begins to shape the way the heart perceives the world, revealing the hidden layers of sin, of compromise, of choices made for convenience rather than conviction. Every injustice, every act of pride, every moment where mercy was withheld becomes a mirror, reflecting the distance between the human will and God's intent. Yet in that reflection there is clarity, for to see the truth is the first step toward transformation. It is in the acknowledgement of wrongdoing, in the willingness to face what has been ignored or justified, that the path toward restoration opens. That journey is not linear, nor is it easy. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, times when the weight of the world and the weight of past failures seem too great to bear. And yet, the message of Micah does not retreat in the face of difficulty. It presses forward, insisting that no darkness is so complete that the light of God cannot shine through it. Each step taken in obedience, however small, becomes a seed of renewal, a spark that ignites change in ways unseen but powerful, shaping character, shaping destiny, shaping the lives of others along the way. Even in the midst of rebellion and corruption, hope remains anchored in God's promises. The same God who warned of judgment is the God who assures restoration, who declares mercy, who calls for return. It is a dynamic hope, one that coexists with reality, that does not deny the consequences of sin, but holds fast to the possibility of redemption. And in this hope, fear loses its grip. Anxiety and despair may linger, but they do not define the path. The focus shifts from what is broken to what can be restored, from what is lost to what can be renewed, from what is humanly impossible to what is divinely assured. The coming of the promised ruler, the shepherd from Bethlehem, remains central to this hope, a figure whose presence bridges judgment and mercy, justice and peace. He is not simply a distant promise, but a living reality that begins to take shape in the lives of those who respond to God's call. His leadership is marked by care, by wisdom, by the steady hand of righteousness, and under his reign, fear gives way to security, oppression to freedom, and conflict to lasting peace. It is the fulfillment of every prophecy, the embodiment of God's plan, the realization of his desire to dwell among his people, guiding, protecting, and restoring. And in this vision, the ordinary moments of life gain extraordinary significance. Each act of integrity, each choice of compassion, each humble step toward obedience becomes part of the larger narrative, woven into the ongoing story of God's redemption. Nothing is wasted, nothing is insignificant. The daily rhythms, the unseen struggles, the quiet victories, all of them matter in the tapestry of God's purpose. Even the smallest expression of mercy or justice resonates beyond what can be, measured, influencing others, shaping communities, advancing the kingdom in ways visible and invisible. The path of Micah's call is also a path of endurance, for transformation does not happen instantly, and righteousness is not acquired without struggle. There will be times of isolation, when standing for justice feels lonely, times of weariness when mercy requires repeated effort, times of humility when surrender feels counterintuitive. Yet each trial is an opportunity to grow, to strengthen resolve, to deepen faith, and to align more fully with God's ways. And in each challenge, God's presence is constant, offering guidance, comfort, and strength, ensuring that no one walks this path alone. And in each challenge, God's presence is constant, offering guidance, comfort, and strength, ensuring that no one walks this path alone. And so the cycle of hearing, responding, and walking continues, echoing across time and space, connecting past, present, and future. Micah's words, though spoken centuries ago, continue to breathe life into hearts willing to listen, to move, to be shaped. The same truths apply now. God desires justice. He delights in mercy. He calls for humility. They are not abstract ideals, but practical, actionable principles that shape every decision, every relationship, every corner of existence. To embrace them is to participate in the ongoing work of God, to step into a story far greater than oneself, to become part of the unfolding kingdom. And as the listener internalizes this truth, the vision expands. The journey of restoration is not only personal, but communal. Justice and mercy ripple outward, influencing families, communities, nations, and ultimately the world. Acts of righteousness encourage others to act likewise. Expressions of mercy inspire similar compassion. Humble living sets an example that challenges pride. The work of God begun in the heart spreads invisibly but powerfully, altering the trajectory of lives and preparing the way for the fullness of His kingdom. Each step, each choice, contributes to a reality where His promises are made manifest, where His will is realized, where His presence is evident. And yet the final reminder is that this journey is ongoing, unceasing, dynamic. The call to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God is not fulfilled once, nor is it confined to a single lifetime. It is a continuous commitment, a daily practice, a constant orientation of the heart and mind toward God and His ways. Even when failure occurs, the call does not cease. Even when the world resists, the invitation remains. And those who persist, who return continually, who strive to live in alignment with God's truth, find themselves carried forward by His faithfulness, strengthened by His mercy, and guided by His light. And so the voice of Micah continues, eternal in its relevance, persistent in its call, unwavering in its truth. It reminds all who hear that God's standards are not negotiable, that His mercy is not limited, that His justice and grace intersect perfectly in the lives of those willing to respond. It is a voice that calls for reflection, repentance, and action, not merely for hearing, but for living. And in responding to it, life finds its true course, one aligned with righteousness, sustained by mercy, and illuminated by the presence of God. And now, as the story reaches its final rhythm, the message turns fully toward restoration, toward hope, toward the unshakable truth that God's mercy triumphs over human failure. The judgment that was spoken is not final for those who listen, for those who turn, for those who embrace the call to walk differently. The sins that once seemed insurmountable are now within the reach of divine grace. The pride that once dominated hearts is humbled. The oppression that once silenced the weak is overturned. The injustice that once seemed permanent is met with righteous correction. For the Lord's ways are higher than ours, and His thoughts surpass understanding. Yet they are always perfectly aligned with love, always measured by truth, always guided by mercy. And in this unfolding vision, the people of God are reminded that no nation, no ruler, no system, no human effort can establish lasting peace or justice apart from Him. Those who trust in their own strength, their own resources, their own cleverness, will inevitably falter, for the foundations of life apart from God are unstable, like sand beneath the feet of the proud. But those who place their confidence in the Lord, who act justly, who love mercy, who walk humbly, will find themselves anchored, even when storms arise, even when enemies surround them, even when the world seems bent toward chaos. They will be sustained, guided, and upheld, because God's faithfulness does not waver, and His promises do not fail. The promised ruler from Bethlehem, whose coming was foretold, stands at the center of this restoration, embodying both justice and mercy, both strength and humility. He shepherds the people with wisdom, He guides them with understanding, He protects them with power, and through Him the nations find peace. Under His leadership, swords are transformed into tools of cultivation, spears into instruments of growth, and the desire for revenge is replaced by reconciliation. In every heart that turns to Him, fear gives way to security, oppression to freedom, despair to hope. And this vision is not merely a distant dream, but a reality that begins to take shape in the lives of those who respond to God's call, in communities that embrace truth, in nations that seek righteousness, and in individuals who choose mercy over selfish ambition. And as this reality expands, the lessons of Micah become living principles. Every act of justice reflects God's character. Every demonstration of mercy imitates His heart. Every humble step honors His sovereignty. These are not abstract ideals, but practical, everyday actions that shape destiny, influence others, and prepare the way for God's kingdom. Life becomes a tapestry of divine interaction, where choices, however small, contribute to the grand story of restoration. The ordinary becomes sacred. The everyday becomes holy. And in this, each life bears witness to God's enduring presence, His steadfast love, and His eternal plan. Yet the journey remains ongoing. The world is still marred by sin, by greed, by injustice, by pride. Temptations persist. Weaknesses remain. Failures continue to surface. But even here, God's mercy provides strength. His grace provides renewal. His Spirit provides guidance. No setback is final. No mistake is permanent. No rebellion is beyond redemption. The faithful remnant, the humble heart, the obedient soul, these are preserved, shaped, and lifted, not by human effort alone, but by the unrelenting hand of God. And so the cycle of hearing, responding, and walking continues, a rhythm that carries through generations, echoing the call of Micah in every age. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with God. And as the voice of prophecy finally rests, it leaves a profound assurance. God sees every heart, judges every deed, and yet delights in mercy. He does not stay angry forever, nor hold grudges across generations. He does not reject those who seek Him, but draws them near. His forgiveness is complete, His restoration full, His love unending. Sin, though serious, is not ultimate. Failure, though real, is not final. Through repentance, through turning, through surrender, life is renewed, hope is restored, and hearts are reconciled to the Creator. It is a promise that transcends time, a covenant that endures, a reality that stretches from the days of Micah to the present moment and beyond. And so the message concludes not in fear, but in confidence, not in despair, but in hope, not in judgment alone, but in mercy fulfilled. The God who spoke through Micah is the same God who speaks today, who calls every listener to reflection, to response, to restoration. His voice is patient, His call is clear, His invitation unwavering. To walk justly is to align with His will. To love mercy is to reflect His heart. To walk humbly is to recognize His sovereignty. And those who embrace this path find not only guidance, but life itself, steady, secure, and overflowing with the presence of God. Thus the story of Micah, though ancient in origin, lives on in every soul that chooses to hear, to obey, and to trust. It is a story of warning, but more profoundly, a story of hope. A story of destruction, but more profoundly, a story of restoration. A story of human failure, but above all, a story of divine faithfulness. And in this story, the final word is mercy, the lasting truth is love, and the enduring promise is that God will continue to act, continue to guide, and continue to redeem those who turn toward him. The voice of Micah fades from the pages, but it echoes in every heart that listens, urging each person to live rightly, love fully, and walk humbly with the Lord, today, tomorrow, and forever.